Good afternoon. We're just about to get started. Good afternoon, and thank you for all of you for joining this important discussion about the essential role of affordable childcare in getting Americans back to work. I'm pleased to be joined by an outstanding group of leaders who will speak to the challenges facing working parents, as well as the solutions offered by Congress and the Biden-Harris administration. At the conclusion of our remarks, we'll open it up for questions. And if you'd like to ask a question, please use the raise hand feature to enter into the queue. Our moderator will then call on you and invite you to unmute your line. With that, I'm honored to kick off today's program by introducing the former mayor of Boston and the current United States Secretary of Labor, Marty Walsh.
Thank you very much, Jim and Scott. I appreciate it. Senator Chair Murray, thank you as well for the great work you do, and thank you for the prioritization of the topics we're going to talk about today. Congresswoman Frankel, it's great to see you. I know that Senator Herrero is going to be on in a few minutes, and some other folks. Ms. Reed, thank you for being with us to share your experience today. I'm looking forward to hearing what you're going to say. It's very important to all of us. We're focused on building back a better economy, and that's why we're here to talk about investing in childcare. Something that's extremely needed in our country. Childcare was not always part of the economic vision or conversation on, or the labor conversation, quite honestly. But the Biden-Harris administration and the legislators in this call are making it a top priority. It's a top priority because we know that childcare is the work that holds up the rest of our economy, and it's the definition of essential infrastructure. Families have known this for a long, long time. But the pandemic has made it 100% clear. It's a problem that demands policy solutions. In the last year, 1.6 million mothers left the workforce, and many more scaled back their hours, even while our recovery is, even as our economy is recovering, they're slow to come back. The job numbers show that. Survey data makes clear that access to childcare is a major driver of that. Even before the pandemic, half of Americans lived in the area where there is not enough childcare to meet the need in those different communities. It's also an issue for providers and workers in the childcare industry. Most facilities are small, women-owned businesses. 90% of the workers in those areas are women. 40% are women of color. They earn, on average, poverty wages. And 1 in 6 children, childcare jobs have not come back. I've seen this as a Secretary of Labor, and I experienced it as mayor of the city of Boston. So the lack of resources for childcare is an issue that creates vulnerabilities throughout our economy. And increasing the availability of safe, high-quality, affordable childcare is an essential part of our plan to build back better. You see it in the American Rescue Plan. In addition to the child tax credit payments due to begin going directly to families this summer, the administration put out $39 billion to the states to stabilize childcare providers, to provide subsidies to families, help parents get back to work, and raise wages and benefits for childcare workers. It's a strong start, but it's just a start. It's a response to a crisis. The American Jobs Plan goes further. It would invest $400 billion in the CARES economy and in its workers. Today, we're focusing on childcare, but there's also the American Families Plan also includes elder care and care for those with disabilities. They are essential needs. The American Families Plan gets the fuller scope of the child care challenges in our economy and advances solutions that we need. It would invest $225 billion to ensure that no working family would pay more than 7% of their income on child care. And the family struggling the most would pay nothing at all. It raises wages for early child care workers, treating child care providers like early educators that they are. It provides universal access to pre-kindergarten for 3- and 4-year-olds, as well as paid family and medical leave. It's an example and expands the supply of child care quality options that families need in this country, including infant and toddlers and kids, young people with disabilities. Quality matters here. Families want safe, loving, educational child care for their kids. They deserve it. One of the first things I did as labor secretary was to visit a child care facility, Bright Start Early Child Care Preschool. You could see what nurture and care means to families. You could feel the love in the yard outside and inside the building in that facility. I am grateful to the legislature in this call for the efforts to forge a path forward and to make this vision a reality. I want to thank you for having me speak today. And now I'm going to turn over to my friend, Chairman Scott.
Thank you, Secretary Walsh, for joining us today and for your continued leadership on behalf of our nation's workers. The COVID-19 pandemic has provided clear evidence that affordable childcare is essential to children, parents, and our economy. According to a new survey from the Federal Reserve, more than 1 in 5 parents were out of work or working less in 2020 due to childcare or school disruptions. However, our broken childcare system has been placing a heavy burden on parents since long before the pandemic. 4 years ago, I joined Senator Murray, Senator Casey, and many House and Senate colleagues to introduce the Child Care for Working Families Act, a bold proposal to reduce the cost of child care for families, increase wages for child care workers, and expand the availability of child care and preschool options. The urgent need to overhaul our child care system is only growing. And I'm pleased that the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan include significant child care investments that are modeled after our proposal. But let's be clear, this is a problem that simply cannot be solved without sustained public funding. Child care is not a sector that can be solved through economies of scale. In fact, in the infant care setting, where providers and children are at a 1-to-4 ratio, basic math says that each parent will be responsible for paying forth 1/4 of each provider's salary. And that's before you consider other overhead costs. These dynamics create a situation where providers have to operate on razor-thin margins. The median child care worker makes less than $13 an hour, and yet still in most states, infant care costs more than in-state tuition at public universities. Children, parents, and our economy cannot continue to bear the cost of our broken child care system. The American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan would finally deliver a long-term solution that provides children access to quality learning opportunities, gives parents the freedom to pursue rewarding careers, and boosts the economy by getting workers back into the workforce. Expanding access to quality childcare and preschool is one of the best investments we can make in America's future. And with that, I'm honored to introduce a tireless champion for working families, the chair of the Senate Health Committee, Senator Patty Murray.
Well, thank you so much, Congressman Scott, for that kind introduction, for all your leadership and partnership on all things childcare and so many other issues. And to all of the other folks on the call, as well as my colleagues, thank you. And thank you especially to Secretary Walsh for joining us today. We are thrilled to have you here on this to talk about an issue that is absolutely critical to workers across this country, and that is childcare. The recent jobs report seems to have surprised a lot of people in Washington, D.C. Didn't surprise me, and I bet it didn't surprise working parents. Across the country, childcare providers have closed due to COVID-19, and millions of women who are already more likely to shoulder caregiving responsibilities have been forced to quit their jobs. Often, they can't even go to they can't find or afford someone to safely look after their kids. Businesses are finally reopening. People are getting vaccinated. Cases are going down. Things are starting to look up. But yet, of the 4.2 million women who dropped out of the labor force because of COVID, nearly 2 million have yet to return. And that is a major problem. You know, childcare has long been a silent crisis among parents. I've heard from them since I first ran for the Senate. But this pandemic has really brought this issue to the forefront. Moms, dads, childcare providers across my home state of Washington and our entire country are speaking up now, loud and clear, about how, when it comes to childcare, things have gone from bad to disastrous. Whether it's because they live in a childcare desert, or they work non-traditional hours, or the cost is just simply too high. The lack of access to quality, affordable childcare is making it impossible for parents, and in particular women, to get back to work. And for women of color in particular, the challenge is even more severe. If we do not solve our childcare crisis, there is not going to be an economic recovery. It is that simple. And that's why childcare is absolutely critical to our infrastructure. Ask any mom. A road won't do you much good if you can't find or afford safe childcare for your kid while you go to work. So to get parents back to work, we've got to pass the Child Care for Working Families Act. And I am thrilled that the Biden-Harris administration has rightly prioritized childcare and preschool in the American Families Plan. Thank you. And with that, I am really honored to introduce Deja Reed. She's a mom from New Orleans who I had to leave her job in March when her son's childcare closed. I first had the privilege to hear Deja's inspiring story at our Help Committee hearing on childcare last month, and I'm thrilled that you could join us today, Deja. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you again for being with us.
Thank you so much, Senator Murray. I appreciate the kind words. And to all, I appreciate the invitation to share my child care story with you all today. My 2-year-old son, Jared, and I live in New Orleans, and finding quality, affordable care for him has been a constant challenge. Just a few months after he was born, I started looking for a child care that would meet all our needs and allow me to return to work. My first choice child care was a great quality program, but I wasn't able to enroll Jared because it was too expensive and there wasn't enough funding available for me to receive child care assistance. I ended up settling for a program that was lower quality, but I could still barely afford it. Child care consumed more than 50% of my monthly earned income. And then the pandemic hit. My son's child care closed, and soon after I was furloughed. I was out of work and not getting paid because I was not able to find child care for my son. I applied for remote jobs and was even offered a new position with the city last summer, but had to turn it down because I had nowhere to take my son. Last September, I finally found a new child care for Jared, which was great timing because I was scheduled to return to work shortly after doing phase 3 of New Orleans reopening. However, Jared went for about 3 weeks before I found out that I was not eligible for the child care assistance because I was not back at work yet. I could not afford the $740 monthly child care fee without the child care assistance, so Jared lost his spot. Eventually, my job reopened, but by that time, Jared's child care was permanently closed, which meant I could not go back to work until I found a new child care provider. Finding child care was even more challenging than it was pre-COVID. So many child care providers had shut down permanently, and for the ones that were open, they did not have as many seats available anymore. Just 3 months ago, I finally found a new child care, and Jared and I love it. I have seen such a difference in him and his development, and we are in a much better place. Being able to find affordable quality care for Jared has been such a challenge. Having quality care and child care assistance consistently over the last 2 years would have made such a difference for us. And I know it would mean a lot to other families. We are scrambling to make ends meet. We're juggling jobs, school, and care for our children. And we are really doing the best that we can. Now we need Congress to do the same and invest in the child care system that Jared and I and countless families across the country need. Thank you for allowing me to share my story. And now, with that being said, I am honored to introduce Congresswoman Franco, co-chair of the Democratic Woman Caucus.
We go. Thank you so much, Deja, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lois Franco, member of Congress from South Florida and co-chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus. It's an honor to be with this very distinguished lineup of presenters. Look, we all know that the COVID pandemic hit us hard, and it is women, especially mothers, who have been disproportionately impacted. In fact, some are calling this past year a she session. Millions of women forced out of the workplace as majority female industries were the hardest hit, and women also pushed out of the workforce by a crisis of care. Schools closed, as did childcare centers, as we're talking about today. And when parents are forced to make the tough decision of who would stop working to care for the kids, it usually meant that the higher earner, the father, would go back to work, the mom leaving the workforce. All this has resulted in the lowest employment rate of women in decades. So as we build back better, both moms and dads need and want to go to work. We know that childcare is essential infrastructure. And I will say that once as a working mother and now a working grandmother, I can tell you from experience that mothers are only going to get on these new roads and new bridges if they have somewhere safe and affordable to take care of their children. So listen, let's not let the train station leave without the train, without the women and the children on it. As Representative Scott said, it's time for this nation to deliver stable, affordable, accessible childcare. And I yield back.
Our next speaker will be the senator from Pennsylvania, Senator Casey, a strong supporter of issues for women and for working people. Senator Casey.
Mr. Chairman, great to be with you, and thanks for organizing this. I want to thank you and Representative Frankel, as well as Secretary Walsh. And I am grateful that Deja joined us once again to be able to make the case on these important issues. And I especially want to commend and salute the work of Chair Murray, the chair of our Health, Education, Labor, Pensions Committee, for her tireless advocacy for all these issues that are encompassed under this bill, and especially for quality, affordable childcare. We know that if we have more families in the country that have access to this kind of care, to give children the early learning experiences that they need in school, we can also at the same time enable parents to get to work so they can support their families. And thirdly, we can provide employers the certainty they need to retain the skilled, productive workers that firm will need to be successful. We know that when children learn more now, they earn more later. That's not just a rhyme, that is true. All the data shows that for the last quarter century or longer. Childcare itself is an essential expense for millions of families across the country. And it's also a critical part of our infrastructure. As Representative Frankel just made mention, as important as bridges are for a lot of families, their bridge to work is childcare and other kinds of care for the family. So it's critically important that we recognize the reality that families face. We know that in the midst of the height of the pandemic, 1 in 5 working age adults said the reason they were not able to get to work was because the COVID-19 had disrupted their childcare arrangements. We also know that at that time, and it still persists today, the labor force participation rate for women dropped to its lowest rate in a third of a century. So even before the pandemic, many families struggled to access high quality care, and federal early childhood programs have reached only a fraction of eligible children and families. Think about this, only 5 of 6 eligible children are receiving benefits. I'm sorry, 5 of 6 eligible children did not receive benefits. 5 out of 6 eligible children. That's just an abomination. It's an insult. We've got to do more. We got to do better than that. We know that the Child Care for Working Families Act does a number of things. In particular, it would ensure that families have access to care by capping payments at 7% of income for low and moderate income families. Second, it would support universal access to high quality preschool. And third, it would improve early educator workforce compensation and fully fund full day, full year Head Start. So in order for us to move into the future together as one family, we've got to get legislation like this passed. And I'm grateful for all those on this call that are making it possible for us to be able to pass legislation like this. Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator, and I thank all of our speakers. This concludes the speaking part of the program. We'll now open up for questions. If you have a question, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. We'll take as many questions as we can. If you're asking a question, please let us know which member your question is directed to, your outlet, and so we can get to as many questions as possible. We'll ask Josh from the committee staff to moderate from here and call on reporters to ask questions. Josh?
Mr. Chairman, I have to jump off right now, but any questions directed towards the Department of Labor We will be sure to get an answer back. I have a meeting in about 1 minute.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being with us, and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Josh?
Yes, and once again, if you'd like to ask a question, please use the raised hand function. And our first question comes from Eleanor Muller.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for hosting this press briefing. You know, my question for whomever would like to take it is basically that we saw a study from the former Obama economic advisor, Jason Furman, on Monday, basically making the case that childcare was not immediately suppressing employment, or at least not parents' employment. Does that in any way affect the urgency behind this argument for such a significant investment in childcare?
I'm happy to answer that. That's one study. There have been countless reports and economists, including Secretary Yellen, who have attributed a lack of childcare to the recent job numbers. And in fact, I think Representative Scott referred to this. A new survey from the Federal Reserve found more than 1 in 5 parents were out of work or working less in 2020 due to childcare or school disruptions. And I will just tell you anecdotally, this is the #1 issue people talk to me about constantly. On any kind of meeting or call that I have, people bring up the issue of the lack of childcare and their inability to be able to do what they need to do in terms of work and help their families out.
Yeah, and I'd like to add also is this. I think what we have to take into account, and I guess using your common sense, obviously, is that the childcare industry was very fragile, actually teetering before the pandemic. And before the pandemic, there were thousands of families who were on waiting lists for subsidized childcare. And there were areas in the country where you couldn't even get childcare. So there were literally millions of parents who would have liked to have gone to work but couldn't go to work. So I think you have to take that into account also.
Can I just make one quick point in addition to what both the senator and the representative made? I think you might have some debate about what's, the near-term issues. But I'll say it again, 1 in 5 working age adults said the reason they were not working was because the virus interrupted their childcare arrangements. That's a fact. That's based upon survey data from individual families. But let's set that aside. One of the most important reasons to pass this legislation is because this is about the future. This is an investment in the future. If children have more early care and learning opportunities that are of a high quality and that are affordable for the family, that child is going to learn more. They're going to be more productive. So this isn't about the short term. This is about GDP growth. This is about outcompeting China. This is about the future.
Thank you. Josh?
Great. And another reminder that you can use the raised hand function if you'd like to ask a question. And our next question comes from Randy Wolf.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I am the executive director of an organization, a statewide sector intermediary in California called Early Care and Education Pathways to Success. And I want to make 3 quick points. One is I just want to say, sort of on behalf of the entire early care and education industry across the country, that this whole, the fact that we are so finally getting to these conversations has been just astonishing and wonderful and reassuring. And I want to just thank all of the people on this call for the work you've done in advancing these issues. The second thing I want to say, and it's been said here, but I want to make sure it gets elevated. Offering childcare is not the issue. Offering quality childcare is the issue. We know from research that if you don't have quality, you're not going to have good outcomes. And that leads to my third point, which is about the workforce. I know because of the work I do, registering and creating and implementing early care and education apprenticeships in California, the way silos operate around issues around workforce development. And I want to raise the question, I know what's going on in the apprenticeship world and in the workforce development world. And the number one reason we can't make significant progress at replicating early educator apprenticeships is because the workforce development world and apprenticeship world says to us, we love the work you're doing. We're so invested in trying to get more women into our world. You check all the equity boxes, but you guys don't pay well. And we're not going to promote fields that don't pay well. And my response to them is don't close the door on that, then open the door and build a broader coalition so that the workforce world is aligning themselves with the early childhood world, and together we'll have a much more forceful voice. So I guess my question to you is, in what way are we making sure that the efforts you're making are aligned with and in concert with the workforce development and specifically apprenticeship efforts, so that the issue of wages no longer keeps us out of the most important rooms and tables that we need to be at? Thank you.
Well, there are two answers to that. First, on apprenticeships, one of the things we're doing in the apprenticeship bill that passed the House is opening up the apprenticeship opportunities for what are called non-traditional apprenticeship opportunities. Basically, apprenticeships have been limited to the building trades. We want to open it up to other opportunities, healthcare, insurance, daycare, things of that nature. So we're looking into apprenticeship opportunities. And as you have indicated, one of the problems with the whole sector is that if you pay people a fair wage, the customers can't afford the service. And so you're almost in a situation where you have to have some government involvement, and the Child Care for Working Families Act provides that support.
Great, and we have a written question coming in for any of the panelists. Are there ways we can specifically support rural communities that are childcare deserts, especially in getting funds directly to local communities?
Well, let me try to answer that just generally, in that the arithmetic on childcare is very difficult unless there is some kind of subsidy. And in rural areas, you don't have the critical mass of people to have a childcare facility that's anywhere close to affordable. And so the support that you're given under the Child Care for Working Families Act can make it possible to have programs set up. And that would be one of the results, I think, from the legislation.
Great, and that is the end of our questions. Mr. Chairman, if you want to wrap things up.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate all of our speakers today. Thank you for your leadership, and I thank all of the reporters for participating. And with that, that concludes the press conference. Thank you very much.